Good day, everyone. Welcome to another DevOps Unbound. My name's Alan Schimmel, and I am the CEO founder of Techstrong Group. We produce DevOps Unbound and have been doing so. This is about 3 years now that we're doing DevOps Unbounds. Luckily, today is one of my favorite types of DevOps Unbound, and that is the live roundtable. For those who don't know, DevOps Unbound is sponsored and actually co-produced with us by our good friends at Tricentis, the worldwide leader in continuous testing. And I'm not even sure if that's the right note anymore. We'll ask, maybe we'll have one of our Tricentis friends update for us. But Tricentis and us have been on this journey for 3 years, exploring all different aspects of DevOps and testing, and CI/CD and security and DevSecOps and everything. As I mentioned, this is a live roundtable version of DevOps Unbound. So unlike the pre-recorded versions where we pre-record them and put them out across our Techstrong TV network, this is treated more like a Techstrong learning event where we have you, our studio audience, join in and help drive the conversation. That's right. We do have an abstract. We have a lot to talk about, but we want to talk about what you want to talk about. And that means we want to hear from you, what you're thinking, what your thoughts are. It could be a question, it could be a comment, could be anything. How do you do that? Well, I can't get you all on screen on video and mic like our panel members, but we can offer you our big marker, which is the system we use, our big marker communication windows. And that means for most of you on the right-hand side of your browser, you'll see this window, and it starts probably with the word chat in black bold. Underneath chat, you'll see different versions of chat, public, private, Twitter. I really want you to focus in on the public button of that. And right from there, you could ask questions of us, of other people who are attending, of everyone here. And just to make sure it works and to get you all kind of acclimated to it, why not? I see some people are already doing it, but why don't you log in and tell us where you're joining us from today? It still thrills me after, 30 years on the internet almost, to see what a worldwide audience we do get on the internet and not just in my neck of the woods. So if you wouldn't mind, log on there, let us know where you're from, and hopefully that'll just be the first of many interactions you'll be having with us today using this chat window. In addition to chat, if you guys look to the right of the word chat, for many of you it'll be grayed out, but it's going to say Q&A. That's another way you can interact with our panel. If you put it in Q&A, only we, our panel, will see it, but I will call it out to the panel to get their thoughts and comments on whatever question or comment you put in there. But the rest of our studio audience would not be able to interact or necessarily see that. So if you want to ask a question directly of the panel, I would suggest you use Q&A. If you want to ask a question or make a comment for everyone to be seen, I would use the public chat. Not to worry, we don't give out your name and contact info. As you can probably see in the chat, it's just first name, last initial. So, feel free and please, been doing these, as I said, for 3 years. Every third or fourth DevOps Unbound episode is a live roundtable. When we get a studio audience involved, they are absolutely the best shows out there. So really looking forward to it. And Juan, I do see you're a big Nugget fan. Mitchell's usually in Denver. He's in Vegas today for the Atlassian show. But the Nuggets have been on a roll. I'm a Knicks fan myself. We're looking good this year. Of course, we've only won 2 world championships in my entire lifetime. And those were both before I was 13. So it's been a while. But thanks for logging in. I appreciate it. Sure, you're laughing, Mitch, because you won last year. Anyway, let us get off basketball for just a second. I took a quick left turn and come back to our show for today. every episode of DevOps Chats has its own unique abstract, its own unique title, and what we want to dive into. Today, we're going to be diving into testing centers of excellence. And we're going to dive in. If you're not sure what a testing center of excellence is, don't worry. We're going to get you up to speed on that real quick. We have an amazing panel of experts here that I want to introduce you to. And then let me introduce you. And these people have all been on previous DevOps Unbound episodes with us, and I know them all, and they are an amazing panel. When I tell you this, I'm not just saying it. So let me introduce you. We're going to start off with our friend. Speaking of basketball, she has her little basketball hoop up there in the background. Our friend Adriana Villela.
I'm not a basketball fan.
You're not a well,
I'm not a sports fan at all.
Could have fooled me with that hoop up there.
It's just to distract me when I need to concentrate, when I need to get my brain out of itself.
Okay. Adriana, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Sure. My name is Adriana Villela. I am currently a senior staff developer advocate at ServiceNow Cloud Observability. You may have known us previously as Lightstep. I have been in tech for 20 plus years doing various roles, starting from Java dev to managing various teams. And now I'm a developer advocate, and my passion lies in observability. And I actually spend most of my time in working in open telemetry, so big on open source. I'm one of the maintainers of the OTel end user SIG.
Very cool. We were lucky enough, we caught up with Adriana in Paris at KubeCon, and we did an interview there. It's on Techstrong TV. And then I believe Adriana and Mitch were both out in Seattle. Was it just last week?
We were.
A couple weeks ago.
2
Good
weeks
to see you again.
Yeah.
Open Source Summit. So great to have you on. Joining Adriana today is, as I said, another return guest on our show. It's Martin Klaus, who also happened to be in Paris for KubeCon, and we also were able to catch up with him. Martin, it's great to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show again, Alan and Mitch. It was great to see you in person in Paris. I was surprised how tall you are.
You're a tall gentleman yourself.
Well, yeah, I'm 6'2" myself. So.
Oh yeah, I was the short one in that. It's 6'1", right?
I think there's Zoom levels, everybody here. But I work at Tricentis. I've been here for 4 years. I'm based in the San Francisco Bay Area in California. I'm currently in charge of our customer engineering team, which is a new function really focused on the more advanced topics of AI power testing and helping customers adopt more automation in general. Previously, I had different responsibilities from product marketing to product management. I used to be a product manager for developer tools, and I have experience in infrastructure, Kubernetes platform application technologies, and now testing in DevOps at Tricentis.
Fantastic. Martin, thank you and welcome aboard. And then our third member is also someone we've had the pleasure of having on DevOps Unbound before, but she was not in Paris. So we were not able to interview her there, but maybe next time. Well, come to Salt Lake City. It's about the same. But she has quite a resume herself. I'll let her introduce herself. Excel Ruiz.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. Well, I have done a lot of stuff during my career. So I used to be a developer advocate at JFrog. Now I'm a senior software developer. I came back to developing. I do a lot of community work. I organize conferences. And I also love technology. So in that regard, I'm, for example, a Java champion, a test containers ambassador, developer champion, and things like that. So I'm passionate about creating software with the top quality that we can achieve and making the life of developers easy in the way.
I get it. Absolutely. Thank you. Michelle, it's always a pleasure to have you on. You always bring a lot to these. So thank you. And then let me introduce you to our last guest today. He's not really a panel member. He's my co-host for DevOps Unbound, as well as partner in business for many, many, many years. He joins us today from the beautiful Palazzo Hotel, live on the Las Vegas Strip, where he's there for the Atlassian conference. Mitch Ashley. Hey, Mitch.
Hey, hey, Alan. Hey, team. It's my first time at the Palazzo this week. So it's good to be back. It seems like this is where every conference in Vegas is held. So anyway, it's good to be here. Thanks, everybody, for joining today.
Excellent. So that's our panel for today. Let's dive into things. So, guys, as I mentioned at the top of the show, today's DevOps Unbound episode is AI, because you always need AI today, DevOps, and the future of testing centers of excellence. And there's a lot I want to say about how AI and how companies today can really improve by having a testing center of excellence, or using a testing center of excellence. But before we go there, look, I know our audience. They're basketball fans, because it looks like we have another Bucks fans there, right? With the Greek Freak. Though they're anyway, they are DevOps folks, they're cybersecurity people, they're testing people, they're cloud native folks, digital transformation, and of course everybody's an AI person today. But I wonder how many people really, really understand what a testing center of excellence is. And I don't think we can debate the merits and uses of it until we sort of lay that ground game down. So who on our team would like to take first crack at defining what a testing center of excellence is? I'm looking at you, Martin.
Okay, well, thanks for
giving you the choice.
The microphone here, but I think there's no one right definition, because a lot depends on a company and their goals and how important quality is from a culture standpoint, because we often talk about people, process, technology, but it's the quality first mindset, in my view, that is almost more important to drive all those initiatives. But what we've seen from customers that actually have a testing set of excellence, they always look at this as a function in an organization that thinks about people, process, technology in terms of metrics and criteria for quality, with the purpose of delivering applications into production faster, but also meeting security, performance, compliance, business requirements in a standardized way. But then also thinking about tools and technology in terms of how are we using, standardized ways for test management or automation to then also help advance that and accelerate that in terms of industry best practices. And the one last aspect is the people aspect, in my view, which is how do we make sure that we have the right folks with the right skill set, the training, the onboarding, and the continued education that both developers and testers and quality automation engineers are trained and equipped to do the best possible job, from design and architecture all the way through development, testing, and production as well. So that was a mouthful, but
no, I like it. I like it. Ishel, Adriana, agree, disagree? Anything you want to add to Martin's definition?
For me, the only thing that I would like to add is the evolution. Like, for example, we started with very, very siloed ways of testing. Every team had its own way to do it. Then we tried to centralize everything, like the knowledge and the process. And finally, it's not only about centralizing, it's about giving back the best practices. And so instead of going in one direction, now it's in the other direction. How do we, if we have created the infrastructure and all the workflows and we have the know-how, how can we go into a more suggesting best practices and the best policies for the new teams that join? So the effort and the shock for developers is less dramatic.
Okay, I don't disagree with. I think that's a good addition to what Martin laid down here. Adriana, I'm wondering maybe if there's anything you'd like to add to our foundation before we start building here.
Yeah, I'd say I definitely agree with Shell's comment about like making sure that you're suggesting the best practices, and I guess the challenge being suggesting in a way that it doesn't put people off, because some people don't like being told what to do. Like my daughter hates being told what to do, so you have to just do it gently. And I think and I agree, like going from this centralized to decentralized, like we've seen that a lot. I don't know that there's a right answer to that either, because both have their pros and cons, and it's almost like you need kind of a mixture of those when it comes to any type of center of excellence, really.
Agreed. We've already got Mikey put up in the QA section. And there's a good comment, and I kind of respect his opinion here, or the point he's making, which is with the number of recent layoffs, and specifically how those layoffs impacted specialized roles such as even testers. Why do you believe that businesses even want a testing center of excellence? It seems that the goal is to democratize testing rather than emphasizing specialized skills in the field. Well, but maybe that's not a bad thing, to democratize testing and bring it to a wider audience. When specialized testing skills are at such a premium, quite frankly, even with the layoffs, right? It's good experienced testers, I have to believe are finding jobs. I'm wondering, you guys are out in this much deeper than I am. What do you think, and how would we answer Mike?
I was thinking, like, in some ways a good center of excellence is one that is ephemeral, almost, that you've done your job if you've pushed the knowledge over to the actual teams doing the testing. So that's one aspect of it. But I think the other aspect of it, like, I think there's something to be said for having like kind of a skeleton center of excellence where you need somebody out there who is still aware of like what the practices are, the accepted practices, who's got their ears, they've got their ears and eyes open as to what's going on, so that they can bring that in. So maybe you don't need like such a massive testing center of excellence, but perhaps something where you've got just enough folks that they're there educating the actual testers doing the work.
Maybe to add a point to what Adriana said, if you, and I actually have the opportunity to speak with all our customers, and if you think back 10 years ago, 20 years ago, how application development teams were operating and how testing was done at the time, it was done pretty much in silos, right? Every team had their own QA engineers, their own test engineers. So there's a lot of duplication. There's a lot of inconsistency. There's a lot of reinventing the wheel that was going on. And at the senior levels, engineering leaders and CIOs have said, look, we need to this doesn't scale. We also need to accelerate application delivery. So let's centralize the quality function, because it's basically doing the same thing for different kinds of applications, right? To achieve consistency, to achieve the same sort of standardization that they're looking for, right? So that was the original, I would say, center of excellence idea. But then very quickly, we realized, well, that's not super efficient either, because different teams have different needs. They use different technology. They want to move at different speeds. And it's very, very different if you build a mobile app for a certain business unit versus an enterprise ERP back office system that's being rolled out over many, many years. And so then the pendulum has sort of like shifted back a little bit to more like a federated model, where the people go back into the function, but what remains is somebody who is in charge of the policies, the standards, the frameworks, the governance body, if you will, to say, here are the recommended tools that you should use. Here are the recommended frameworks that we've tested and tried. Here are the ways that all the teams can work together. And then they also sometimes, share best practices that some of the teams may have discovered in their own right, to then share that out with the rest of the organization. But I'm looking at some mission statements from some of our customers and their TCoE, and there's one that really sort of stuck out from my perspective, because in their mission, in addition to talking about defining quality metrics and sharing best practices, they specifically mention the phrase remove silos, align on a unified strategy, save money to deliver better products in support of the company's goals to double its revenues. And so when you can tie sort of like the functional aspect of the role with a business outcome, then that actually creates business value. And it's sort of the enduring value that quality teams can provide to the organizations, despite change in industry and hiring and layoffs and other things. Because if you can prove the value and what you're worth to an organization, then it's a no-brainer. Yes, this is a critical function. We can't get rid of it. And so that then also allows folks that are in this function to basically build a career to become more senior in the organization, or to move on to other more senior roles in the future.
So I wonder if there's not an analogy here to what we see with low code, no code, developing a cadre of citizen developers versus kind of professional developers. Are we adding, with the help of things like AI and test centers of excellence, are we headed towards maybe citizen testers?
Alan, I think that's one of the things that we can explore. Is I've always thought traditionally about center of excellence as something where you knowledge kind of captured and disseminated, best practices, et cetera, which is a great definition. But I think it's really also about how does AI change the work of testers, as well as low code, no code, making citizen testers, new technologies like that. What about observability and testing? How can that change or improve? So it could take on a role, I think, of what technologies or new practices or approaches can we kind of research and find out the best way to utilize those things, or find out from our teams who are using some of those capabilities and disseminate that out to the rest of the organization. So look forward, like how do we continue to evolve our own practice, our own of what we bring to the table.
Absolutely. You know what? Caleb in the audience, he's a real live QA engineer, right? He says, I'm a QA engineer, and over time, my role has adapted into leading engineers in testing efforts, developing best practices, etc. And I think this is a trend that really kind of but accelerated and became prominent during the DevOps era, where testing engineers stopped actually doing the testing and just started picking what tests to run. And then a lot of it became automated, and with AI, more of it will be automated, and it'll start picking what tests to run as well. But certainly, I think that's something we need to acknowledge here, which is the changing role of the QA professional, of the test professional, who, as I say, oftentimes isn't really spending as much time doing the testing as much as it is choosing the testing, if you will. Thoughts on that? Excel, I see you nodding your head. What do you think?
Well, I totally agree with you. I mean, AI, it's an excellent tool, and it's going to change a lot, like how we build applications and how we test applications. That is for sure. I'm usually very cautious with AI because it's a tool and we are not perfect. Our tools are not perfect. So when I'm talking about developing or letting it loose to create whole applications, I'm more cautious. But talking about testing, I'm more happy and more optimistic because, for example, creating scenarios, or it is easier. And for example, detecting patterns of how our users interact with the different applications and extract information, like how can we benefit the next generation of tests with this information. So it's from our interaction with our customers and the users or the end users of our products. It's also all the information that we are gathering for observability. How fast is it? Is it fast enough? Like, we are getting more information. And AI shines at this. I'm finding patterns, extracting more inside information from a huge amount of data. So in that regard, I'm extremely optimistic about this point. On the other side, I agree with what Martin and Adriana were telling. Either it's going to disappear, but you still need the skeleton, but you still need somebody to create those best practices. Because that's the other thing. Our products don't stay static. It's not a one shot and then we fulfill all the dreams of our users. It has to change. And in this change, we either change features, we either change platforms, we change a lot. So the requirements and the abstract idea of how it has to behave, why it has to behave like that, changes. And so we need actually people that it's able to envision that, because AI still doesn't help you in that regard that much. So it's happening with developers. We are not going to be the ones that are creating getters and setters, like the small things, because then we have now a tool that it's proving to be more or less useful to do that for us. So everybody has to move into the more creative, more impactful, more brain power activities of our work. But AI in testing, I'm so optimistic.
I'm going to paraphrase a bunch of different messages coming through the chat. And so, yes, we are moving to sort of a citizen tester. Yeah. And as Adriana mentioned, it's the end users, and unfortunately that is too often not just a joke, it's true. But, and then these citizen testers, there's not even sort of a QA pro overseeing what they're doing necessarily. And in some cases, it may be AI is the overseer, if you will. But as, Paul and Mike and some of the other folks have said, well, that's where the role of the human has to come in here, right? We got, if nothing less, at least let us oversee the AI, right? Who's watching the watchers? And it's a scary world, to get into it on. But this is, this is a real thing that's going on, and I think way too many organizations. And I think one of the reasons that so many, managers and business executives smile with glee around AI is the idea of, okay, I don't need that QA pro overseeing my citizen people. I could let AI do it, right? And AI never gets sick. It never misses a day. It doesn't take vacations, and I can train it and everything else. So, other people here in the audience, Detlef just put in, we will have some sort of public testing with the help of AI, some sort of everyday testing. But Martin, you made an interesting point. If we're going to have the public be the testers, the test bed for us, the guinea pigs, whatever you want to call it, they need a feedback loop. They need a way to feedback. Otherwise, it's for naught, right? Wondering about that, Adriana, Martin, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think, the notion of citizen tester is a good one. I think most companies, at least from my perspective, and I have a lot of exposure to enterprise applications like SAP, Oracle, and so forth, the notion of citizen developers, citizen testers is really focused on those applications and the business requirements and the process view and the workflows and the business requirements that need to be implemented and therefore validated when you have business rules, and sometimes there might be conflicting rules, and really bugs hide not in plain sight, they hide around the edges where business rules are conflicting potentially with one another. Like you have a discount, But then you have a policy and you have regional requirements and you have other things that get in the way. And any combination of those requirements could then ultimately lead to an incorrect order or taxation and other things that actually can be quite detrimental from a business standpoint. I think where there's an opportunity for, as I mentioned in the chat, an opportunity for sort of pushing the needle further a little bit is on the end user side, because I think you've all been in situations where you've interacted with an application and then you got stuck. It didn't work, or you couldn't log in, and there was either no help or some nondescript contact your administrator message like, who is my administrator? I have no idea. And so you have a bad experience, you have nowhere to go. So I think there could be an opportunity from an observability standpoint, like quality observability. I don't know if that's a thing, to say, well, how do we capture the end user experience better, to feed back those things into development, into testing, because ultimately things end up in production anyways. You can never achieve 100% accuracy from a bug standpoint. Some things will slip into production always, right? So the question is, how do we capture that? How do we respond to it? And how do we automate things to prevent from happening in the future?
I think that's where actually we can leverage AI for that, because we were talking like end users catch weird bugs, right? Especially because end users come up with the most unique ways of using the system that you could never have predicted in a zillion years. And I'm thinking, well, I think, Martin, you pointed out, how do you get the users engaged with the feedback loop? And I'm thinking, well, what if like when some sort of bug is incurred, you can have like a little AI pop up saying, hey, do you want to log this as a bug, kind of thing? Something where like AI can kind of nudge you in the right direction, possibly.
Yeah, I think the issue is that from an automation standpoint, like strictly automation standpoint, AI will help a lot, and we've seen that throughout human history, if you will. Like automation always creates productivity gains and improvements, regardless of the technology, from frameworks to platforms to AI and so forth. The issue is understanding the intent, right? Because going back to my example of a frustrated user that can't log in or has a problem, the developer might say, well, actually, the application works as intended. You were never supposed to log in from a Mac on a VPN, traveling somewhere remotely. That's not allowed. That's not what the application is meant to do. So how do you capture intent, right? That is the thing that AI, I think, current state can't always capture, right? Because it's not written down. It's maybe out there somewhere in people's minds. But that is the thing that is really, really hard to automate. And I think quality engineering, quality automation is going to move more into that space to say, how do we capture business intent, business objectives, and then sort of build an environment around that informs application development, application delivery, quality in development and production as well.
Martin, and I think this is where like observability can fit in, because you're capturing, like, as part of your distributed tracing, if you've instrumented your system, then you can capture at least, if a user has experienced something, you can at least like trace down the steps that they took for that thing to happen. So at least you're starting to like build that picture. Now it's a matter of like putting that all together in a way that you're actually able to identify that as a bug, right? Because if no one identifies it as a bug, they'll be like, oh, whatever, this piece of crap, I'm not going to use this, or whatever, or they try again. I think that's where, like, I think we can capture the information. It's just connecting the dots to turn that into something that we can actually make actionable.
Excellent. Guys, we got two posts up in the QA short section I wanted to bring up. One's probably going to kick off a long discussion, I imagine, but can you see how a team is using, or can you say how a team is using AI to build robust testing frameworks? Martin, I'm wondering, I mean, this has got to be something Tricentis is looking at.
Yeah, I think AI and robust. I'm not sure if I would put that in the same sentence, given how things are evolving at a very rapid speed, and I think we're still learning. What are the really good use cases and how to prove those out. I would say continue to experiment and see what works for you. What we've seen with our co-pilots and sort of I would say the more generative AI based capabilities versus the machine learning capabilities. Machine learning, I think, is mature technology. It works well. We understand how to apply it. Where it's what industry is still, I think, evolving is quite a bit on the generative AI use cases. Anything that's based around an LLM to suggest test steps, test cases to drive automation. I think there's actually a really good article by Jody Bansal, I think. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but he's the co-founder of AppDynamics.
Yeah, from AppDynamics.
And he's out there talking about how there used to be a ratio of 3 developers per 1 tester in a typical application development team, or whatever you can scale up and down. Now the developers are using co-pilots for code creation. Now that puts a lot more pressure on the testers as well, right? Like how do we, there's going to be this big shortage of QA engineers to keep up with, the amount of code the developers are producing with the help of co-pilots, and the corresponding issues around security and code quality and things that need to be checked and tested for, right? And so I think I think this is still evolving in general, like how do we use AI to drive test automation, but at the same time, what's the oversight that those tests are actually good tests, and identifying those issues. To have a test, it's not necessarily, all that great, but you want tests that actually find things and capture bugs and defects that otherwise go undetected, right? You cannot let the inmates run the asylum. That's why we have the separation of roles between development and testing, right? It's a very different function, different goals, different responsibility for the purpose of building better quality software.
Excellent. Great answer. If no one else wants to jump on that, we have another QA one here from Caleb, which is, how would you build culture around citizen testing? Considering all of the negative experiences so many people have with providing feedback and all of that, is there a culture of citizen testing?
I don't know if it's a culture, Alan. One of the things I was thinking about when I saw that question is, this is another customer experience question, right? How do you engage the people who use the software in this model of, oh yes, yeah, I want to test it too, or I want to provide feedback to that. You might even be able to apply some things like gamification, right? You've reported the top number of bugs this week, or you found the hardest problem we've been trying to run down and we fixed it, or doing some things that make it more of an activity than just a complaint department of I found a problem and moving on. The other thing I was thinking about too is the more we can build in telemetry, to Adriana's point, into what software is doing, and not just logging messages, but what is the user doing, whether they're a citizen tester or they're just an end user. Because it isn't at the end of it, to ask them to describe the steps that they took sometimes is hard to put that back together, right? They're busy doing their job, not tracking what steps they took so they can tell you what the problem was. So we can use that data, I think, much more effectively. Maybe AI helps as well. So I think we need to think about how do we build that in as much as we think about a culture of citizen testing.
And I would say also encouraging people to give that feedback, because I think a lot of the times we'll encounter a bug and just get mad and either walk away or keep trying until it works. And so if we have, we get into the habit of logging issues as we encounter them. And also not making the process of logging the issues so damned annoying, I think is the other thing. Because me as a user, if I'm trying to log into my bank to look at my statement so I can friggin' pay off my credit card bill, I don't, and then something goes wrong. I don't want to take 50 steps to log an issue with that website, right? Because that's annoying.
For me, I think we still haven't had nailed down the feedback loops. Like, how do we connect back with the different organizations, teams, or departments? So that's a problem. The second is that we seem to forget that there is a context. We have power users, normal users, or the users that do not want to interact a lot with our applications. So that's also sometimes these feedback loops, if they exist, they treat all people the same, which is not the case, because sometimes you have power users that can provide even more information, and we are not accepting that kind of feedback. The other thing is that I see as a little bit of a problem that we need to improve, but this is, again, it's only the structure, the infrastructure, is how fast do we actually detect a problem? Because if we don't know when a problem has happened, we don't know, we're not going to trigger either the form, or we're not going to trigger, or whatever mechanisms we have decided to provide feedback. And the last point is users, when you present a consistent way of doing things, you reduce the friction of them doing the same thing. So if we can have very intuitive ways of providing feedback in a simple way, in a very concrete way, I think it's going to improve all the entire software experience.
Agreed. This is a fantastic audience, by the way. There are people having side conversations here and with it. I appreciate it.
Uh-huh.
On the issue of AIs for testing, though, Adam here had a good point about GitHub's experience with Copilot. And they're not the only ones doing Copilot. Copilot's not a trademarkable name, evidently, and everybody has a Copilot with their software today. But in GitHub and Copilot, the fact was it was trained on code that, contained errors, vulnerabilities, and everything else. So what do you expect? How could you expect the results that it gives you not to contain those as well? Yes, but those are beginning problems, right? I think those are the kinds of things we're addressing with SLMs and better training and better LLMs that these things are based on. But even this, in spite or besides all of that, it is very helpful in standardizing formatting and getting you going here. I know a lot of developers who are using Copilot to really kind of kick things off and to be a lot more productive. Detlef, who's had some profound things here to say, says, isn't generative AI a one-way road? We have some rules that are trained, but these are not built with the end user feedback. Well, I would say in essence they are, because that body of knowledge that AI, Copilot, whatever is using, is based upon the information that's put out there, which could very well be end user feedback. It's just not as clean as we would like.
Yeah, Alan, maybe I can jump in here, because I had a customer meeting last week where this actually came up as a topic for discussion, that especially in financial services and healthcare, in any sort of regulated industry, or even in larger enterprises where you have a certain amount of compliance, security, data privacy, data location, and governance requirements, the use of copilots is not yet allowed. And except for sort of like experimentation, and there's all sorts of articles out there as well where secret code or proprietary code ended up in the model because developers had, certain companies were not careful with the way the prompts were submitted. And what a lot of companies are looking at is, how can we get like a GitHub Copilot for on-prem for our for our environment that's very specific to our organization, that's trained with our coding practices, that's trained on our sort of release, code or, repos that we have and maintain our own organization, right? And then companies are realizing it's actually quite expensive to set up and maintain your own LLM on your own infrastructure, because there's a huge amount of compute resources required to do that. And so the next question is like, how do we then sort of combine both and have like a baseline model like a GitHub Copilot, but then some sort of a RAG augmentation on top of that is very specific to an organization, but separate. And it's a one-way street where data or code cannot leave the company's firewall or premises, if you will, right? I think that's where the discussion is right now at the moment, to say, yes, I like what I'm seeing out there. We can't use it for various reasons. We want something that's specific to our organization. We can't do it with the infrastructure ourselves, but like, how do we get both, right? So I don't know if anybody in the audience has had conversations like that in own organizations, but I'd love to hear what other companies are doing in that regard.
Anybody? No? Okay, let's just move along then.
There's a great question there, Alan. And did you see the most recent question about
QA?
Yeah,
I
about
I only do one window at a time, Mitch. But
I know. I just wondered
why don't you take it?
Yeah, there's a great question that Lynn submitted. Can you discuss the specific strategies that TOCs can employ to seamlessly integrate with DevOps pipelines and workflows while maintaining their focus on fostering innovation and ensuring quality? So how does test be part of the flow of the work without, taking away from them doing the core work that they're doing? I know that, probably all of our panel has implemented testing in a DevOps environment. Maybe there's some suggestions or tips we could share. Excel, do you want to start?
Yes, for sure. I mean, for example, from the developer perspective, we can create even more interesting workflows or like, for example, expensive tests. And the thing is that we can decide when to run them, for example. And one of my most favorite projects for testing and integration tests, which usually it's considered as the most expensive type of testing from the developer perspective. I'm not talking about the testers and quality assurance. We still can make it as fast as possible and with the least resources available. So I think that is how even developers are contributing back to the centers of excellence, the testing centers of excellences, by using already tools that are really well proven or tested into helping the entire software development process. So yes, choose the right test, encourage your developers to bring back their implemented solution into different teams. And if it's reach the best practice or the minimum workflow, listen to them.
It's a good point of creating feedback loops, right? In between test and development, not just the outcome is test and code and here's a bug, right? So what are things that can be done during development that might make the fluidity or the ease, the friction of software going through the process of being tested? But also, what can developers help us inform us in testing about characteristics of what they've created that we can be, even more effective about how we test it. So maybe a center of excellence can also act as encouraging those feedback loops between teams and also sharing the outcomes of that with the rest of the organization.
I would say that's a loaded question, and the answer is it depends. But I think that's exactly what a well-established TCoE can add in terms of advising and maybe even implementing strategies based on what are the specific workload characteristics that the application is going to exhibit in production. Is it highly fluctuating based on the number of users that are signing in at a certain time of the day or certain times during the year. Because if that's the case, then you want to focus more on performance or scalability. If usage is more constant, then maybe that's performance is less of a concern. It's more like making sure that you're optimizing resources and capacity. If your application has a lot of data and transactions that need to be processed, then maybe that's an important quality metrics, and you want to focus more on data integrity testing. And then the other thing you want to think about is what actually can be automated and what makes sense to include in a CI/CD pipeline that is going to be executed at different stages of the commit cycle. To say, if I'm writing code on my laptop, what are the things that I need to be testing as part of like some sort of smoke testing or pre-integration testing exercise, and what are the things that we're really testing and staging before we deploy into production. And then the other aspect, one more, is applications change. Therefore, automation is going to break, right? So you have to think about like, how do we maintain the automated tests that ultimately are going to fail because somebody is making changes that now require you to fix other things that you thought you had already automated. And then you have to think about, is it still required to run certain tests, and what can we sort of retire because the application has evolved so much that tests that you've run maybe 6 months ago are no longer relevant, right? And you can get rid of it to maintain a healthy build cycle, deployment speed, turnaround time, if you will, because otherwise everything is going to get bogged down at some point, and you just can't do anything because it takes 2 days to run through a complete regression test. And so you don't want that either. So it's sort of like a lot of things that you have to think about, but experienced TCoEs understand what it takes, and it can also then sort of give you the strategies to sort of help implement that.
I'd like to just add my 2 cents to that. Coming on with my observability hat, to have that, I think Ishel had mentioned like having that feedback loop between dev and testing, and there is no better way to have a lovely feedback loop there than to instrument your code, because when developers instrument their code, you can make instrumentation a quality gate for QA. So if your code, by the time it hits QA is instrumented, it serves 2 purposes. One, QAs can use that to troubleshoot and it can help inform developers as to the quality of the instrumentation. So if they're able to troubleshoot, great, I have enough information to troubleshoot. Instrumentation done, decent job, right? Can't say perfect, but decent, right? If they can't tell what's going on, code has not been sufficiently instrumented. Back to the drawing board, developers. The other thing too is then testers can leverage that instrumented data to create trace-based tests. So leveraging your tracing, your distributed tracing to create basically integration tests. I think the trick with that, as we see in DevOps pipelines, is we don't want our tests to be so massive that our pipelines take forever and ever and ever. So I think that's really the balance that we need to be able to achieve. But by having but definitely by making tracing like a gate for a quality gate, it definitely encourages that feedback loop between developers and testers.
Fair enough. Guys, we're coming up at the top of the hour. I wanted to just take a moment or two on some things here. First of all, Cody, I don't know if you're out there, if you want to pop up and chat the handout. Guys, the only way we get these better is your feedback. And I will tell you, thank you so much to the audience today, because there were 6 or so of you who just kept this conversation moving. And I was content to sit back and just watch you guys answer each other's questions. But for everyone else, and there's hundreds of people registered for this, if you would take a moment to fill out this little 1-minute survey that if you go to handouts, you'll see it in there. Cody might have put it in chat already as well. I'm hoping
it's at the top of the chat now.
Yep. And if you can take that survey literally, it takes a minute, but it's immeasurably helpful to us to figure out how to keep improving these things. You kind of are our citizen testers at that point. But so if you would take a moment to do that. And then, look, we have, I don't know, 3-4 minutes left here. I wanted to give each of you about a minute to kind of tie a bow on our discussion today. And Excel, why don't we start with you? Because I think I introduced you last, so we'll let you go first.
Thank you very much. Well, for me, the main takeaways, feedback is king, but you have to make it easy, make it compelling, and make it complete. So that means that you have to take care of what you're measuring, how you're exposing it. When we as developers or testers get the data and we can analyze, that's the most compelling way of changing either the workflow or changing how do we react, or for developers, actually accepting any changes on the workflow. If we're going to add a new tool, that is expensive. But if you show the benefits or the pain points, that's an incredible way of convincing your entire team. So feedback, it has to be quality, concise, it has to be timely. And that is super important. Reduce the friction between the different tools. A very complicated workflow usually works against you most of the times instead of with you. And what else? AI, I'm very optimistic because it can bring insight and find patterns and that's one of the use cases where it shines. So I think it's worthwhile to have a look at this point. Maybe don't trust it just yet. It's a tool. It's a very powerful tool, but it's not perfect so far.
Excellent. Thank you, Excel. Martin, how about you?
Loaded question. Thank you. But I think it's these are exciting times. As Jill mentioned, the technology is amazing that's out there right now, and feedback is king. I would say your business objective needs to be the North Star for everything you do, and need to ask the critical questions. What are we trying to accomplish, and how do we do it? And this is the right way to do this. And I think there was some mentions in the chat here about overemphasizing automation. I actually agree. I see this all the time where people think that they're buying a tool to solve all the problems, or automation to solve all the problems. It can be a key part, but you also have to think about what we're trying to do, how do we get there, and in many ways, this can actually help you sort of get more clear about what is it that you're going after from an application development standpoint, right? It's not about feature creep. It's not about sort of doing more all the time, but take a step back, look at the bigger picture, ask the right questions, and then sort of think about like what's the right thing to do from a people, process, technology standpoint.
Excellent. Thank you, Martin, as always. Adriana, over to you.
Yeah, so I would say make sure that you have that feedback loop between your developers and your QAs. And the best way to do that is through instrumenting your code because it benefits both. I'd say also enable citizen testers because especially in prod, right? Your users are your testers. They're the ones that come up with the most bizarre test cases that you can never dream up in a zillion years. And by having that instrumented code, you have a chance of figuring out what that bizarre use case is. And definitely agree with Ichel's comment on AI. This is definitely an exciting time for AI, especially in the testing space. It's always with the word of caution, right? Because AI is a great co-pilot, and I think they can help surface a lot of things. They can help nudge us in the right direction, but we still need the human to be in control of things. But definitely, we have that kind of technology available. Why not leverage it?
Excellent. Thank you, Adriana. Mitchell, last word for you, and then where you got to hang up here.
All righty, just real quick. I think we should consider changing the term from testing center of excellence to testing center of innovation. There's a lot of things happening in our world that is changing how we create software and how we can test software. And in addition to sharing our knowledge and kind of helping teams across the organization, let's work on how we can leverage things like AI, how we can use AI-generated testing, how we can use the data that we're creating in all of our processes and workflows through DevOps. So think about this as looking forward as well as how do we share what we're doing today.
Excellent. Many thanks to our friends at Tricentis for co-hosting DevOps Unbound, sponsoring DevOps Unbound with us. Couldn't do it without them. Many thanks to our panel members. What a great panel. This is why we love having you guys on. Most of all, many thanks to all of you out here who are watching this and who participated. You really do make these special. Thanks very much. That's it for here. This is Alan Schimmel. We are out of here. And have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.